Yeah, so this is literally the first ever podcast of Konga Fitness, something we've been thinking about for a year now, but we're finally doing it, which is great. Mahmoud is a great friend of mine, someone who I've spent some time getting to really know. He's great because he's a jack of all trades, man. This guy knows what he's doing with photography, videography, website fixes, mechanic, you name it, he does it. And that's why I think he's a really good person to talk to.
That's
Because
good.
he's the perfect person to talk to if you really want to know anything about anything, right? But a little backstory about Mahmoud, he's someone who does jujitsu, so he's a purple belt. Yeah,
Yeah, so I had been practicing jujitsu for about 7 or 8 years,
yeah,
um, but prior to getting the purple belt, right? So closer to 10 years when I got the purple belt.
mm,
But yeah, I've been off now because of a back injury. So I've got knee pain and back pain.
right.
So I've been avoiding jujitsu because if you are not taking care of your body, especially in a sport like jiu-jitsu, if you're not taking care of your body, taking time to stretch and warming up prior to
Right,
getting on the mats,
crucial.
it's recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
So obviously I didn't take care of my body, and that's where we're at right now, basically.
I mean
But
that's the punchline, right? It's like sports. Every single sport has its problems with injuries and stuff like that. Jiu-jitsu is just a little bit more because it's a little more impact. There's a lot of unknowns with how you're gonna fall on your back.
yeah,
From my experience, at least, it's like jiu-jitsu has a lot of back pain and knee pain problems, right?
yeah,
Because you're always curling up. So they have what is known as a guard position when you're on your back, and someone could be really putting a lot of their body weight onto you, and gravity is kind of helping them do that as well, and
that's
it's just
exactly
really
it.
crunching the back, right?
Yeah,
So a lot of the top jiu-jitsu guys too always complain about back pains, have these back surgeries just to fuse their discs because of all the injuries from inherently the problems of jiu-jitsu, which is always being on your back. But you've had back pain, you've been dealing with it for quite some time. I just wanted to touch upon what are some of the things you've tried to kind of deal with the back pain, reduce the pain, or that was there anything that really worked well, and if so, how?
Stre- but mostly it's stretching. That's what I've done.
Perfect.
I have attempted to strengthen muscles in the back. I find that when I start to do that, because I don't necessarily have guidance in doing it, so
Mm,
when I start to do that, it really tightens up my back, and then it flares up,
right.
right? So unless I'm actually with someone who can guide me through the exercises, and it's one of those things, like sometimes you're your own worst enemy. You go to the gym, you think you could do more than you can do,
Mm,
and you push a weight that you would have normally done, but it's not necessarily the weight that you should be doing, especially with the current state of your, the body and the right.
yeah,
And so that's what happens with me. Stretching's huge.
stretching.
Stretching and movement, just movement. Like I played soccer the other day. I felt amazing after moving. You know,
Okay.
like I've got a bad sciatic on my left hand side,
Okay.
and when I find that whenever I walk or whenever I run or whatever the case might be, as long as I'm moving my lower part of the body, I'm so much better off than actually sitting on the couch and getting stiff.
Right.
And that's what's helped me. So it's the motion, right?
And it's a huge revelation, and I think most people are aware of the fact that motion is lotion, in the sense that it's just going to loosen everything up, right? But it's just I don't know why people don't think to do it, right? It's like, okay, they know what to do, but why aren't they doing it, right? And you touched upon something before, which is like you do want to go to the gym and strengthen because you know you have to strengthen,
Yeah,
but sometimes you'll strengthen something and it'll get a little too tight,
yeah.
and you're thinking, okay, am I doing the right thing or not, right? So a big part of it is just finding the right guidance, right? Like who can you go to kind of like talk about what should I do by my low back? Is it just stretching, or do I actually have to strengthen it as well?
Yeah.
And me being a physiotherapist, I'm like, dude, like stretching good, but you guys strengthen it too, because the stretching is only going to get you so far, right?
Yeah.
It's like, great, your muscles can lengthen. Well, how are those muscles going to support you when you need them most? And that's through strengthening, right? But we also fall victim to like what to do for strengthening, right? There's so many different ways to strengthen the body, and a lot of the times when you're dealing with back pain is what's the right thing to start with, right? Do you go right away to do a leg press or like a squat like you may have touched upon?
Right.
Or do you start with just like the very basic like low back strengthening, like those hyperextensions where you're just working on those glutes, getting those lumbar extensors really fired up, but very low impact and to the point where it's not gonna really get you stiff, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the important thing to kind of figure out. It's like, okay, it's probably not just stretching. Maybe I should consult someone. And then when there is strengthening, what are the right things to do, right? But this kind of leads to my next question is like, what's something that you've tried on your own that maybe works surprisingly well? I mean, like, there's so many different devices out there. Like, you got the teeter, you got the soul right, you got all these different little things. It's just like, I'm almost starting to believe that a lot of people are just getting in on this fad. I just wanted to get your take on that.
So I bought the soul right.
Oh, you did, eh?
I bought the soul right.
Okay. How'd you find out about it?
Well, Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan?
Joe Rogan, yeah. Name drop another podcast, right? But
right there.
Joe Rogan podcast. I bought the soul right, and that's the problem is that you don't know whether it's mental. You know, like is it just a mental thing? I can't tell you.
That
can't
sugar pill. Was it the placebo effect?
Was it the placebo, right? Because I bought it, I used it that night, and I got up and I was like, oh man.
Felt amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And then the next day I was like, oh, it's back to normal. Like, here we go, back to normal. Right? So like, still stiff again, still whatever, right?
Right.
It's not going to fix it. So I don't know if it's gonna fix it. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's like the soul right doesn't help. I'm sure it helps, even if all it did was make me feel better in that moment.
Right.
You know, I think you've mentioned this before, where it's like even if that's all something does to get you up and moving again, so that you can start doing the exercises that you need to do, then that's probably better than. Well, that's better than nothing for sure.
Hey, listen, man, like,
right?
The placebo effect is the most powerful effect on earth. Like, it's the reason why drug companies make so much money.
Yeah.
It's because, like, you can take a sugar pill thinking it's Tylenol, it's going to fix your pain. If it affects you to the point where you believe it's going to help you, right?
Yeah.
And I think with something like the Sorad is, like, it's a little bit of both, actually. So, the way Sorad works is that it's supposed to put pressure into your psoas muscle, which is a hip flexor muscle, right? Yeah. So you basically lie down stomach first, and you got these two little things that just dig into you, gravity assisted, right? You're lying down, gravity just pushing you down to it. So it's a very passive thing.
Yeah.
And you're putting what is known as temporary ischemia on the muscle. So you're starving the muscle of oxygen so that it can relax, right?
Oh,
a lot of people who have back pain because of a tight hip flexor. Right?
Okay.
So why is the hip flexor affecting your low back? You're probably wondering, right? It's like everything's connected, right? If you look at the anatomy of the psoas muscle, that one that soul right's trying to target, it's targeting this muscle that actually attaches to your lumbar spine. So people think it influences your hips, but that muscle actually also attaches to your low back.
Okay.
Right? So when it gets tight, it's not only affecting your hips, it's actually affecting your low back. And if you use something like a soul right properly, it may have that therapeutic effect of calming down that muscle, loosening it up, and then you feel great. Right?
Okay.
So it's like perfect. It's affecting something that may actually be helping you apart from the placebo effect, right? But then you touched upon something really interesting. It's like, great, I felt great. Next day, stiff again.
Right.
Right? So that's something that I want to address because... And my answer to that is always, it depends. Okay, so you felt great.
Yeah.
What did you do after? Did you do something after that's now going to influence the joints of the low back, right? Because the muscle can be stiff and it's going to limit your joint's ability to move. But then you loosen up that muscle. It's not stopping your joints from moving anymore.
Right.
Did you then do what we call like cat camels or knee rocks that are going to get your spine to like bend forward, bend back,
Yeah.
rotate, right?
Yeah.
Did you get the joint a chance to kind of move?
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. It's just they think you get the relief and that's it. But my friends, I implore everyone to believe this, that pain is just a signal. You get rid of pain. It's not necessarily fixing something. It's just telling you you may have done something right. Or you may have confused the body, which is another problem too, because there are a lot of modalities out there where it's gonna shock you. You're gonna put a cream and it's gonna feel like, oh, I feel this heat.
Yeah.
It's just masking the pain.
Right.
Right. And is that really what we're trying to do with pain? No, man. We're
No.
we're trying to fix something here, right? So it's interesting. Now that kind of leads me to my next question. It's like, okay, we talked about something physical. Have you tried anything like supplemental, like anything that's worked in terms of like ingesting a nutritional supplement or something like that?
So I use collagen.
Collagen.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of back pain, doesn't do anything in terms of back pain.
Okay.
But I've always had joint pain in regards to my knees, and so I've had an ACL surgery on my knee before. Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you never feel confident after the surgery. You never feel confident. You can never it's one of the, it's a mental game at that point, right?
Sorry, I just want to ask, like, in terms of the surgery, was it a reconstruction?
So they replaced the ACL,
Okay.
right? So whatever that might be, I think they took like something from the hamstring, like a string through the from
Okay.
from
They
the hamstring.
got a graft from the hamstring and they put it as your normal
Yeah.
ACL. Okay.
Yeah, so right down the middle of the whatever they do.
Perfect. Okay.
So but you never feel 100% confident about your physical actions after, right? So if I was running a race, I'm always mindful that I don't actually go my 100%. I'll go 90%, right? I'll never go 100.
Yeah.
And so you'll never peak physically in terms of a sport. Like you'll never actually show what you're fully made of in terms of
Right.
a sport. But at the same time, at the very least, you're actually playing, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It's a
common problem, by the way.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm sure it's a common problem, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, the collagen has helped me. I feel that it has helped me recover in terms of if I play a sport, it's no longer 3 or 4 days of joint pain. It's maybe a day of joint pain, and it's not as intense.
How long have you been taking the collagen for so far?
I'm probably 4 months now.
4 months.
Yeah, 4 months, and I think they say that you're supposed to take it for like after the first 2 or 3 weeks, you should start to feel some effects. But I take it almost every day now. Like I try my best not to. Just religiously on it. Yeah. Not to miss it. Because I know how I feel after, right?
That's great, man.
So
that's great.
That's what it is, right?
And like you look at the body of evidence behind things like collagen, glucosamine, chondroitin. These are all supplements that people have historically taken over the past 10, 20 years for joint pain.
Yeah.
The theory behind it is that all these three things that I mentioned are building blocks to your cartilage, right?
Right.
So the problem with the joints is that, well, not a problem necessarily, but the joints are lined by what is known as an articular cartilage, right? It's a very smooth surface that lets things just move really well, right? Over time, with a lot of ground and pound on your joints and stuff like that, what happens is the joint surfaces of the knee might get a little close, and then it starts like rubbing on that cartilage. And then over time, what happens, especially if you have a history of an injury where it was like a traumatic, rubbing of the two joint surfaces, is you get wear and tear to the cartilage, right?
Right.
Now, why does the body not do a good job of repairing cartilage is because there's not a lot of blood flow in the cartilage, right?
Okay.
And there's a lot of theories as to why the cartilage itself doesn't have a lot of blood flow. But the main indicator of whether a tissue can recover is its blood flow, right? So the amount of oxygen that can be shunted to said tissue at a given point, right? So now what people think is that taking these supplements will be able to kind of give those joints a building block without the need for blood flow as much. But there's a lot of conflicting research on it, right? But it's interesting that you're saying that the collagen is actually you noticed the effects, and it was almost right away that you noticed it, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember we had a conversation before about, you know, you were taking for a week, and like you noticed that you weren't as sore.
Yeah.
And we had the whole discussion about placebo and like how much of it is placebo, how much of it is the actual collagen, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you've had that benefit from using a supplement
Yeah.
where research would tell you that, okay, maybe it's just placebo. So it's something that I wish that research will kind of like fully revisit and see, you know, is there a way they can track to see like how that collagen is influencing your joints, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's great, like 4 months and like you're feeling good after, so it's good.
So I was doing a physical checkup at the doctor's, and
Recently,
I told they said, so are you on anything? I said, no, nothing really, just collagen.
Okay.
And they looked at me and they laughed.
They laughed about it? Oh,
they laughed.
great,
I'm like,
yeah.
listen, I've had this conversation. I said, I've had this conversation with a friend of mine.
Yeah.
I know that the science behind it is not necessarily there in the medical field.
Yeah, yeah.
But even if it's placebo, I'll pay for the placebo, right? Like at that point, you know, if I feel better mentally, which makes me feel better physically, or I believe I feel better physically, then fine, I'll take it.
It's the power of the mind.
Everyone needs that edge. You know, I think if you can get that edge, just take it, right?
I agree with you, man. I agree with you. And it's just, I find a lot of professionals get stuck on just research, like what helps with research, what is backed up by research.
Yeah.
But what you have to understand is a lot of things that we do as treatment is really hard to study, but we know anecdotally it helps.
Right.
Like for example, one of the things I use a lot of is deep tissue work. You know, a lot of physiotherapists don't use as much deep tissue work, and it kind of boggles my mind. But it's like when you do deep tissue work, you're able to kind of get the superficial kind of tissues out of the way, so you can affect the joints more, where we focus more of our attention, right?
Right.
But a lot of the reason why they don't use deep tissue work is that there's not a lot of research behind deep tissue work, oddly enough.
Okay.
But I know anecdotally that when I release someone's TFL, for example, which is like a muscle that's like tight in everyone who has IT band syndrome, they could automatically get a lot more hip internal rotation. I'm just like, well, I don't get how research doesn't show this, but here's the reason why. It's like, it's so subjective. One person releasing a TFL can be completely different than how another person releases it, right? And even if they're instructed to do it the exact same way, the person that you're treating now is going to be different. You can't treat the same person over and over and over again. It has to be like a group of people, right?
Yeah.
And they can share the same demographics, age, occupation, stress levels, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, you can't replicate it in research. It's really hard to study, but there's a lot of merit to it, right?
Yeah.
And so what I believe is that you got to combine research with experience with anecdotal evidence. And anecdotal evidence is something that the medical profession doesn't address as much of, right? Because it's like the hard to research, right? But my argument is that a lot of what we do is really hard to research. You can't replicate it, right? But drugs you can.
Yeah.
Right? Drugs are a lot easier. You can pretty much control the dose. You can control how it looks. You can make them believe a certain thing. You explain to them the exact same way. And a lot of times, most people will react very similarly to drugs, right? So that's why drugs are more heavily studied, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah,
well, plus it makes them money. That's what it comes down to, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just like...
yeah. It's a money game, right? So,
yeah. Especially for those iffy ones, like, you know, drugs for pain, drugs for muscle spasms, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it's like, with mental disorders, there's a big stigma behind it, right? A, like, you know, how much do we understand it? B, because we don't understand it so much, is it, you know, ethical to use a lot of these drugs, right? So, man, it's the pharmaceutical industry is... I don't want to say it's our enemies as people who use an alternative approach, but a lot of the time we do conflict with what I say versus what they say, right? So it's really interesting.
Yeah. I think like you look, you can't write it off. I mean, you can't write off pharmaceuticals. They help. They're beneficial, right? It's just a matter of like, if you can solve your problem without taking these pills, then okay, it's going to take you time.
Yeah.
But this is the better route.
And right? That's pretty much the perfect answer. I can't put it any better myself. It's like, if you don't need to use it to start, try the alternative approach first.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a life or death thing, or if it's a very specific drug for a disorder like diabetes where you need your insulin shots, that's where pharmaceuticals really, really help and have actually advanced our lifespans, even, right? Like, a lot of the vaccines have saved a lot of lives, and like, there's obviously a huge debate to that as well. But like, when it comes to like the very iffy ones, like mental, disorders or like just pain, it's like now you're getting to the point where you're just like, do you need it? Have you tried other approaches, right? Because the side effects are a problem too, right? Like, you look at all the organs that take a beating from things like Advil, as simple as Advil, right? A pregnant lady cannot take Advil, right? But they go through a lot of pain, right? So you gotta start exploring reasons, as to why we're even using the drugs. Is pain a bad thing sometimes? No, but actually pain can be a helpful signal, right? We talked about it before. It's just like pain gets such a bad rep too. Pain is our body telling us, dude, do something about it. It may not be taking a drug to remove the pain signal itself, but like do something, So that's my take on drugs too. But like you nailed it on the coffin. It's just like, if there's an alternative approach where it's a little more natural, why not try that first? If you can. But if it's life or death, of course, that's where drugs may help. But yeah, it's an interesting debate, something that maybe we talk about some other time. But I wanted to kind of get back to like your back and your knee pain. It's just like, I know it's because it's something that a lot of people have to deal with, right? And there's so much unknown, like about what to do. But you mentioned that you stretched. There's that whole strengthening. Are you doing currently something right now in terms of strengthening, like specifically, that's worked particularly well for you? And if so, what was it?
So there's this thing called the reverse hyper, right? So where like the gym that I go to doesn't have the machine, but you can try and mimic the movements within it, within the machine. So there's a machine that does the back extension where you're just laying on a 45-degree angle almost, and you're extending like this.
You got it.
So now if you were to reverse it, so instead of your head being up here, your head's down there and your feet are up here, and you just swing your legs, right? So now you are somewhat mimicking a reverse hyper system, right? That I find helps a lot, and it tightens my back in a way where it doesn't feel like it's tight muscle. It just feels like it's protected muscle now. It just feels like okay, I've fortified my back, and I can, I've got a little bit more stability around my core, my back, my whatever, right? And so it's not the same tightness as I would get if I were to lift. Let's say I was doing like a whatchamacallit, like a
deadlift, for example.
Right? If I was doing a deadlift and I was to get stiffness in my back from the deadlift, it's not the same type of stiffness, which is an uncomfortable stiffness. It doesn't feel good. Feels like I've done something wrong. Right? The other one is more like a fortified, like I'm stable now. Right? So fake reverse hyper, basically, right?
Fake, or maybe the real way of doing it, right? And for those who don't know what the reverse hyper is, it's this machine that was created by a world-renowned powerlifter. I don't remember his name. I think his first name's Louis. He had the worst low back you'd imagine, right? The powerlifters, heaviest squats, heaviest deadlifts, and he's old school, right? So they didn't know a lot in terms of like low back prevention, in terms of low back injury prevention, right? So they would just like pound the weights and like lots of compressions going on in the low back. So out of necessity, this man with the worst back pain, just like he said, forget it, I'm going to create this device. And it's the simplest thing ever, right? But what it does is it does a couple things, right? You're strengthening your glutes with it because you're using your hip to extend it. So you're using your hip muscles to help lift up the weight, right? But here's what's different about this workout is on the way down, you actually want your legs to come down fast in a controlled manner, not like you just like loose, but you're letting it go fast because that's going to build a little momentum so that your legs go forward. and in that moment, your back is now decompressing.
Right.
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 So here's a problem with backs. They must withstand gravity 24/7, especially when you're standing. Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of compression, compression, compression. Everything we do is compression. We lift weights. Compression. When do we not compress? Right. There's two ways. One is the way you mentioned. Another one is just sleeping. Right.
Right.
So oddly enough, when you wake up from a good night's sleep, you get a little bit taller.
Yeah.
And your back's actually looser.
Okay.
Right. This machine replicates that experience, but in a mechanical way where you're actually forcing it to happen. So the way you can get around to doing that workout without needing the machine is the way you mentioned, right? But it's a great machine to kind of create that stability in the back, and that's another word that you mentioned. It's just like stability. Like there's that difference between a good pump in the back and a bad one, right?
Yeah.
And the bad one's usually you can probably attest to this, but it's like a deep one. It feels like if you move, you can't.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Whereas the healthier one is like it's just a little more diffuse. It's more superficial, and the back feels like it's got you.
Yeah.
It's just like it's there to protect you. It's buddy with you now.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a different kind of feeling, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So it's good. It's good. I mean, like there's obviously things that you can do to help your situation, whether you have a knee problem or a back problem or whatever the case is, right? It takes work. That's what it takes. It takes work. There's no magic pill, we all know someone who is always looking for that magic pill, right? But that doesn't exist, right? It's always about how much time are you willing to put in to fix your problem, right? And the more time you put in, the better your situation will be, right?
Absolutely.
In anything you do in life, you take the time to approach the situation, you're better off, right?
And like a part of it is like you can attest to this. It's like you're not in the industry of rehab or professional, treatment, right?
Yeah.
But you reached out to the professionals, right? Like you've reached out to physiotherapy, you've done chiropractic, you've reached out to personal trainers.
Yeah.
Like our own personal trainers, like you've worked with Konga before, of course, too,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're saying, listen, I'm going to look for where the source of knowledge is for this one thing, and I'm going to get the best advice possible, right? Because this is what these guys do, right?
Yeah.
And I stress this out because a lot of people don't do that for the health, but they'll do it when they're being sued, so they'll approach a lawyer, or if they don't know how the heck to manage their numbers for their business, go to an accountant, right? Right? They want to learn how to dance, they go to a dance instructor, right? But oddly enough, when it comes to health and movement, people don't have that push to reach out to a professional, someone who knows it more than anyone else, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they go to the doctor, the medical doctor, the general practitioner, where it is free for everyone, right? In Ontario, you have bullhip, right?
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of people have coverage and stuff like that through their employers, but when they go to that doctor, they always have in mind the doctor will know exactly how to fix me in terms of movement, back pain, knee pain, all these things. When in actuality, they don't deal with orthopedic injuries as much as a physiotherapist will, a chiropractor will, a personal trainer, a high-level personal trainer will, right?
Yeah, it's not their specialty, right?
It's not their specialty. It's not, but it's within their scope, unfortunately, right? And there are a lot of good doctors out there. But what I'm trying to say is you got to go to the person who has the highest knowledge in that field.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be your general practitioner, right?
Yeah. The human body is like I always, when I look at the human body, I always look at it as like a car, There's no difference between, there's a lot of differences, but in
the
terms
main
of
one is you can't replace parts on the body, but yeah.
Right. Well, they're replacing parts now, so it is what it is, right? But
True.
The thing is, with a vehicle, you don't want to just show up to your mechanic when your car is broken. You want to show up to do the regular maintenance so that your car doesn't break, And that's what it's about, right? Like, I've got a 2007 Honda Civic. It's 300 plus thousand kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
The only major thing that I have done on that vehicle is an alternator.
Okay.
I replace that oil religiously.
Okay.
I maintain that vehicle religiously.
Mm-hmm.
right? It's gotten 300,000 kilometers. Generally, the vehicles that are getting 200,000 kilometers are like those are one-offs nowadays, right? Like these are disposable vehicles now. You're buying a car only to dispose of it in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Like that's how they're being built. But if you are actually taking the time to take it to your mechanic or a physiotherapist, because physiotherapy is not just about the actual rehab of a human body, right? Prehab is a part of it. So,
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, you could speak to that. I just.
I mean, you nailed it. I mean, here's the thing. You're a mechanic. You know this, right?
Yeah.
I'm a physiotherapist. I know about prehab, right? It's just like people have to, A, they have to look for the knowledge, and B, they have to just like, I don't want to use the word submit to it, but like, just like, pledge to the fact that whatever someone's going to tell you in that field is going to do what's best for you, right?
Yeah.
Now, 9 times out of 10, people are good people,
Yes.
especially in a profession. They want what's best for you. So you can trust that you can listen to, a good mechanic or a good physiotherapist, right? But you said it best, man. Like it's not just about treating an injury when it happens. In fact, a lot of injuries, if you do that, it's usually too late,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Like a whole, a huge knee injury where you destroy your ACL, you destroy your meniscus, you destroy this and this and this. People think it's just a freak accident, right? But what they don't see is, was the hip doing its job to protect the knee? Was the ankle doing its job to protect the knee, right?
Right.
Was the back doing its job, right? They don't make that link, and I don't expect them to. But again, it comes down to how can we educate them too? Like, can we do a better job of educating the public that don't just come to us just because you have an injury. Come to us like for that repair, for that maintenance for the car, right?
Right.
And I think that's why this podcast is going to be a great opportunity to do that, because it's how we're going to try to get to the masses, right? And I feel like not enough people are talking about these things, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a great way to kind of end this podcast. Episode number 1. I don't know what I'm going to title it yet. I guess we'll think about that. But man, dude, it was an honor to talk to you about all this, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
For sure, I'll be back.
All right. Done.
That was good, huh?
We're naturals.